Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Invitation. Hercule Poirot placed the silver letter opener with geometrical precision beside the square of blotting paper and regarded the envelope that lay before him. Thick cream stock, embossed crest, the faint scent of Russian leather and bergamot. Already the little grey cells stirred with pleasure. Such stationery was rarely wasted on trivialities. The card inside was brief and perfectly phrased. Sir Reginald Hawthorne requests the honour of Monsieur Hercule Poirot's company at Blackthorn Manor, Surrey, on Saturday the 14th of November at 8 o'clock for dinner and the unveiling of a singular curiosity. In the bottom right corner, written in a hurried but decisive hand, were the words, "The Onyx cane will be revealed. Your discretion and your genius are relied upon." Poirot's moustaches gave the smallest quiver of satisfaction. A curiosity, yes. A cane of black onyx, carved from a single piece of stone and mounted with gold, had passed through the auction rooms of Paris 20 years earlier. Rumour insisted it had once belonged to Colonel Sebastian Mortimer, the explorer who vanished in the Hindu Kush in 1879 while carrying secrets that certain empires still preferred buried. Poirot had admired the catalogue photograph at the time. The head shaped like a snarling tiger, eyes of flawed emerald, and along the shaft minute hieroglyphs no scholar had yet translated with certainty. Captain Hastings, sprawled in the opposite armchair with the Times spread like a collapsed tent, looked up. "I say, Poirot, you're smiling like a cat who has discovered not only the cream but the entire dairy. What is it? An invitation, mon ami. One that smells, how shall I put it, of mystery seasoned with peril." Hastings brightened at once. "Jolly good. Are we going?" "We are indeed going," Poirot declared, rising and smoothing an invisible crease from his waistcoat. For when a man who owns half the antiquities between Cairo and Samarkand begs for my discretion, it is certain that someone, somewhere, is about to behave very foolishly indeed. Saturday evening found the two friends descending from the Bentley at the foot of a sweeping gravel drive. Blackthorn Manor rose against the darkness like a Gothic wedding cake. Turrets, stained glass, and enough ivy to conceal an infantry regiment. Light blazed from every window, and the air carried the crisp bite of wood smoke and imminent frost. A butler of sepulchral dignity relieved them of hats and coats. In the entrance hall, a suit of armour appeared to eye them with disapproval. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," the butler intoned, "Sir Reginald awaits you in the long gallery." They passed beneath a minstrel's gallery and into a room that seemed designed to intimidate. Suits of Japanese armour stood sentinel beside Ming vases, tall enough to hide a man. A tiger skin snarled silently at a glass case containing a jewelled Mughal dagger. And at the far end, beneath a chandelier that dripped 1,000 crystals, stood their host. Sir Reginald Hawthorne was tall, lean, and silver-haired, with the posture of a man who had spent years ordering bearers up impossible mountains. His evening dress was impeccable, but his eyes, bright blue and restless, betrayed a feverish excitement. "Monsieur Poirot!" He strode forward, hand outstretched. "You cannot imagine what it means to have you here. The greatest detective in Europe beneath my roof." "You flatter me, Sir Reginald," Poirot replied, bowing, "but I confess the lure of your famous cane was irresistible." Hawthorne's smile sharpened. "Then you shall not be disappointed. But first, allow me to present my little circle." He turned to the assembled guests, 12 in all, not counting Hastings and Poirot. They stood in uneasy knots, champagne glasses catching the light like wary fireflies. "Lady Hawthorne, my wife." A handsome woman in her late 40s, dressed in midnight blue velvet, inclined her head with cool grace. Her eyes, Poirot noted, were the colour of winter seas and just as stormy. My nephew and heir, Mr. Victor Hawthorne. A young man of perhaps 30, elegant but faintly dissipated, lifted his glass in lazy salute. The cuff of his shirt glittered with a diamond large enough to offend good taste. Miss Diana Vale. The actress was unmistakable. Titian hair, emerald gown, and a smile that had broken box office records from London to Los Angeles. She greeted Poirot with theatrical warmth, but her gaze flicked constantly toward Victor Hawthorne, Professor Carmichael of the British Museum, a stooped, bearded scholar whose eyes gleamed with academic hunger at the mention of the cane. Mr. Felix Reinhardt, the Viennese collector. A small, dapper man with a monocle and the watchful stillness of a duellist. And finally, Sir Reginald said with a touch of malice, Mr. Jasper Trent, antiquities dealer, and some say my most persistent rival. Trent was broad-shouldered, sun-tanned, and dressed with the careless expense of new money. He raised his glass to Poirot. A pleasure, monsieur, though I confess I'd rather hoped Sir Reginald would invite me to buy the cane, not to watch it flaunted. Laughter rippled, thin and brittle. Dinner was announced. They processed into a baronial hall where a long table glittered beneath candelabra. Poirot found himself seated between Lady Hawthorne and Miss Vale, with Hastings opposite, already pink with the effort of not staring at the actress. Conversation flowed like the Chateau d'Yquem, smoothly, expensively, and with hidden currents. Victor Hawthorne drank too much and laughed too loudly. Professor Carmichael attempted to engage Reinhardt in a discussion of Kushan's script and was politely frozen out. Jasper Trent watched the company with the detached amusement of a man at the zoo. At last Sir Reginald rose, tapping his glass. Silence fell as completely as a stage curtain. My friends, he began, tonight is not merely about good food and better wine. Tonight I fulfill a promise made long ago. After dinner I will unveil the Onyx cane, the Mortimer cane some call it. Few men alive have seen it. Fewer still know its true history. He paused, enjoying the tension. But first, a toast to secrets. May they remain buried until the right moment. Glasses rose. Poirot sipped and observed. Lady Hawthorne's hand trembled almost imperceptibly. Victor stared at his uncle with something that might have been hatred. Diana Vale's smile never reached her eyes. Coffee was served in the long gallery. Footmen wheeled in a mahogany display case draped in black velvet. Sir Reginald dismissed the servants with a flick of his wrist. Only the 14 guests remained. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, "behold." He drew back the cloth. The cane lay on crimson silk like a sleeping serpent, 30 inches of polished black onyx veined faintly with silver. The tiger's head handle snarled in frozen ferocity, emerald eyes catching the chandelier light and throwing it back as green fire. Along the shaft, tiny symbols, part Egyptian, part something older, marched in perfect rows, a collective intake of breath. Professor Carmichael leaned forward as though pulled by a string. Reinhardt's monocle dropped with a faint clink. "Magnificent!" whispered the Viennese. "More than magnificent," Sir Reginald said. "Unique, and tonight, for the first time in 40 years, it leaves its vault." He lifted the cane reverently. For a moment Poirot thought the collector intended to hand it round, but instead Sir Reginald merely turned it slowly, so every facet caught the light. "Notice the tiger's left eye," he said. "A flaw, yes, but deliberate. Colonel Mortimer believed it held a map. Others say a curse. I say it holds a secret worth more than empires." Victor Hawthorne laughed, a jarring sound. "Really, uncle, must we have ghost stories with the brandy?" Sir Reginald's eyes glittered. "Some ghosts, my boy, are very much alive." At that moment, the great chandelier flickered, as though a sudden draught had passed through the sealed room. Shadows leapt across the walls. When the light steadied, Poirot's gaze swept the company. Someone, he was certain, had moved closer to the display case. Someone whose reflection had not quite matched their posture a second earlier. He smiled politely, twirled the end of his moustache, and made a small, private bet with himself. Before the night was out, he thought, Sir Reginald Hawthorne would have cause to regret his theatrical flourish. And Hercule Poirot, for all his urbanity, was already looking forward to proving it. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Study. The hands of the ormolu clock on the mantel had barely crept past 11 when the first scream tore through Blackthorn Manor. It was a woman's voice, high and ragged, coming from the direction of the West Wing. Glasses slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. Champagne hissed across Persian silk. For one suspended heartbeat, the long gallery became a tableau of waxwork figures. Diana Vale, half-turned, lips parted, Felix Reinhardt's monocle dangling like a tiny pendulum. Victor Hawthorne swaying, eyes wide and glassy. Poirot was already moving, surprisingly swift for so compact a man. Hastings stumbled after him, colliding with a suit of armour that clanged in protest. "Mon Dieu, the sound came from Sir Reginald's study!" Poirot snapped. "Feet! Hastings' feet!" They reached the corridor just as Lady Hawthorne appeared at the far end. One hand pressed to her mouth, the other clutching the doorframe as though the floor had tilted beneath her. "He's dead," she whispered. "Reginald, he's dead." The study door stood ajar. A wedge of lamplight spilled across the turkey carpet like fresh blood. Inside, Sir Reginald Hawthorne lay sprawled on his back before the cold fireplace, the onyx cane still gripped in his right hand, as if he had been examining it at the moment life fled. His eyes stared sightlessly at the coffered ceiling. His mouth was open in a small, almost comical O of surprise. A thin line of saliva had dried at the corner of his lips. Poirot knelt at once, 2 fingers seeking the carotid. Nothing. The skin was already cooling, yet not coldly rigid. Death had come within the hour, perhaps less. "Heart?" Hastings asked, voice hushed. Poirot did not answer immediately. His gaze travelled over the body with the precision of a watchmaker. The cane lay at an odd angle, the tiger's head pointing toward the door. A faint scratch, no longer than a matchstick, marred the onyx just below the gold ferrule. On the desk, papers lay in disarray. A half-written letter, a spilled fountain pen, an ink blot spreading like a bruise. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot murmured. "The cane, it is clutched too tightly for a man who simply collapses. See how the knuckles are white even now. And this scratch, it is fresh. Onyx is hard. To mark it requires force, or a diamond perhaps." He rose and moved to the French windows. They were closed, the curtains drawn, yet when he tested the handle, the latch lifted easily. "Unlocked," he said softly. "Curious. Sir Reginald was a man who valued security above comfort. Why leave a door to the terrace unfastened on a night when he displays a treasure worth a king's ransom?" Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Victor Hawthorne shouldered past his aunt, face blotched with shock and whiskey. "Uncle Reginald!" he cried, then stopped, staring at the body as though it were an accusation aimed directly at him. Good God! Behind him the remaining guests crowded, a frieze of pale faces. Professor Carmichael's beard quivered with agitation. Jasper Trent's jaw worked soundlessly. Diana Vale pressed a lace handkerchief to her lips, though her eyes were bright, almost avid. Poirot raised a hand. "Mesdames et messieurs, I beg you touch nothing. Captain Hastings, you will stand at the door and permit no one to leave this corridor until the police arrive." Hastings squared his shoulders with military relish. "Right you are, Poirot." Lady Hawthorne found her voice. "The police! But it was his heart. Reginald's heart has troubled him for years. The excitement of the unveiling, perhaps," Poirot said gently. "Yet we must be certain, madame. A man does not die clutching a priceless relic without inviting questions." Felix Reinhardt removed his monocle and polished it with unnecessary vigour. "Naturally, the authorities must be summoned, though I confess I fail to see anything sinister. Sir Reginald was not a young man." Jasper Trent gave a short, humourless laugh. Convenient timing, though. The cane revealed, the collector dead, the heir. His gaze flicked to Victor, suddenly very rich. Victor flushed crimson. "Keep a civil tongue, Trent, or—" "Enough!" Poirot's voice cracked like a schoolmaster's. Silence fell. "We will conduct ourselves with dignity. Lady Hawthorne, when did you discover your husband?" I came to ask if he wished more brandy. The door was closed. I knocked. There was no answer. When I entered, her voice broke. She pressed the handkerchief harder against her mouth. Poirot nodded sympathetically, but his eyes were busy. He noted the position of the chairs, two drawn close to the desk, as though Sir Reginald had received a visitor after leaving the gallery. An empty glass on the blotter, a faint aroma of whisky still clinging to it. And on the carpet near the hearth, a single muddy footprint, the tread of a man's evening shoe, pointing toward the French windows. He bent closer. The mud was dark, almost black, and carried a distinctive smell. River silt, perhaps from the Thames. "Interesting," he murmured. Within 20 minutes the local constabulary arrived. A flustered sergeant and two young constables who gaped at the opulence as though transported to Versailles. They were followed shortly by a harassed police surgeon who confirmed death between 10:15 and 10:45, provisionally attributing it to cardiac failure. Poirot listened without comment, then requested permission to question the household before the body was moved. The sergeant, recognizing the famous name, agreed with alacrity. The guests were shepherded into the morning room. Poirot began with the butler, Grimshaw, a man whose face might have been carved from the same onyx as the cane. After Sir Reginald dismissed the footman, did anyone enter the study? No, sir. Sir Reginald was most particular. He rang for no one, said he wished to be alone with the cane for a few minutes. And the French windows? Locked and bolted at dusk, as always, sir. I checked them myself. Poirot thanked him and moved on to the maids, footmen, the housekeeper. All told the same story. No one had seen Sir Reginald after he left the gallery with the cane cradled like a child in his arms. Yet someone had visited him. The two chairs, the second glass, the muddy footprint. At 1:30, the police surgeon prepared to remove the body. Poirot requested one final examination. Kneeling again, he gently prized Sir Reginald's fingers from the cane. As the rigid hand opened, something small and metallic rolled onto the carpet with a faint tink. A gold cufflink, engraved with the initials V, H, Victor Hawthorne's cufflink. Victor, summoned back to the study, stared at it as though it were a scorpion. "That's mine, certainly," he said hoarsely, "but I haven't the faintest idea how it came to be here. I was in the billiard room with Trent and Professor Carmichael until Lady Hawthorne screamed." Trent and Carmichael confirmed the alibi at once. Too quickly, Poirot thought. Lady Hawthorne, when shown the cufflink, turned the colour of parchment. "Victor was devoted to his uncle," she insisted. "He would never—" Her voice trailed away. No one, Poirot reflected, looked convinced. As the ambulance men carried out the shrouded figure, Poirot stood alone in the study a moment longer. He lifted the cane, turning it beneath the green-shaded desk lamp. The fresh scratch caught the light like a secret wink. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 2. Outside, frost silvered the terrace, and the footprints, those mysterious muddy footprints, were already beginning to melt. Poirot twirled his moustache thoughtfully. "Non, mon ami," he whispered to the empty room. "This is not the heart that failed tonight. It is something altogether more deliberate." And high on a shelf, a small bronze Buddha smiled its eternal, enigmatic smile, as though it had seen everything and would tell nothing. Chapter 3. The heir's secret mourning came to Blackthorn Manor like a reluctant witness, pale, cold, and unwilling to speak plainly. Hercule Poirot stood at the breakfast-room window, cup of chocolate balanced perfectly in one hand, watching frost glitter on the yew hedges. Behind him, the long table was laid with silver salvers of kidneys, kedgeree, and devilled bones, yet only 2 places showed signs of use. The household, it seemed, had little appetite for food the morning after a death. Captain Hastings, loyal as a Labrador and twice as obvious, was attacking a plate of eggs with the grim determination of a man who believes calories can cure any awkwardness. "Ghastly business, Poirot," he said through a mouthful of toast. "Poor old Sir Reginald." Still, the police surgeon seemed certain it was the heart, and Victor Hawthorne swears he never went near the study after dinner. Bit of bad luck, losing that cufflink. "Luck, mon cher Hastings," Poirot replied without turning, "is a lady who visits only the most deserving, and last night she was conspicuous by her absence." The door opened. Victor Hawthorne entered, unshaven, eyes red-rimmed. He wore a plum-coloured dressing gown that made him look younger and more vulnerable than the arrogant young man of the previous evening. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, voice hoarse, "a word, if you please, in private." Poirot inclined his head. "But of course. Captain Hastings, you will finish your eggs, n'est-ce pas? They grow cold, and cold eggs are an insult to civilization." Hastings took the hint with a wounded expression and retreated. Victor closed the door firmly behind him. "I didn't kill my uncle," he said without preamble. Poirot regarded him calmly. "You proclaim your innocence with admirable directness. Sit, Mr. Hawthorne. You will tell me everything, and you will tell me the truth. Otherwise, I assure you, the police will not be so delicate." Victor collapsed into a chair. For a moment, he stared at the untouched coffee pot, as though it might offer absolution. "I owed money," he said at last. "A great deal of money. Cards, horses, a disastrous investment in some Canadian silver mine. £43,000 to be precise. My uncle had paid my debts twice before. Last month he swore it was the final time. If I came to him again, he would cut me off entirely." "And the cane?" Poirot prompted gently. Victor's laugh was bitter. "Everyone believes the old story, that there is a secret compartment in the shaft, a map to Colonel Mortimer's lost cache of Afghan emeralds. Uncle encouraged the rumour, said it increased the cane's value. I thought, if I could borrow it for a few days, have a copy made, sell the fake to one of the continental collectors. Reinhardt would have paid 100,000 without blinking. I only needed to examine it closely, find the catch. So last night, after the unveiling, you went to the study." Victor shook his head violently. "No, I swear it. I was in the billiard room with Trent and the professor until my aunt screamed. I lost my cufflink earlier. During dinner, I think. Anyone could have picked it up." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You are certain you did not visit the study at any time after Sir Reginald left the gallery?" "Positive. Yet your cufflink was found beneath your uncle's dead hand, and the cane bears a fresh scratch, as though someone tried to force it open." Victor buried his face in his hands. "Then someone is trying to ruin me." At that moment, the door burst open, and Lady Hawthorne entered, still in black silk, but with a travelling cloak over her arm. "Victor, the car is waiting. We are going to the solicitor in Guildford. The will must be read at once." Victor rose unsteadily. "Of course, Aunt Clarissa." Poirot lifted a restraining hand. "One moment, madame. Before you leave, there is a small matter. Last night, when you discovered your husband's body, did you notice anything unusual, apart, of course, from the tragedy itself?" Lady Hawthorne's eyes flicked to Victor, then away. "Nothing. The room was exactly as you saw it." "You are certain? No paper missing from the desk? No drawer left open?" I was distraught, Monsieur Poirot. I saw only Reginald." She swept out, Victor trailing behind her like a man walking to the scaffold. Poirot remained in the breakfast room thinking. Then, with sudden decision, he donned coat and hat and stepped out onto the terrace. The frost had melted, leaving the flagstones dark and wet. The flower bed beneath the study windows showed clear signs of disturbance, broken stems of winter jasmine, a deep imprint where a knee had pressed into the soft earth. And there, half hidden beneath a crumpled leaf, the twin of the muddy footprint he had noticed inside. Poirot crouched, measuring with his eye. The print was long and narrow, made by an expensive shoe, certainly. But something else caught his attention. A few grains of pale sand, adhering to the damp soil. Sand that did not belong to Surrey. He straightened, brushing his gloves together. "Curious," he murmured, "very curious indeed." He was still standing there when Hastings appeared, breathless. "Poirot! You'll never guess what I've just heard from the housekeeper. Sir Reginald received a telegram yesterday afternoon, delivered by hand. She saw him read it in the hall, and he went quite white. Ordered the reply to be sent at once. Come tonight without fail. 10 o'clock. Use the terrace." Then he burned the original in the library fire. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the reply? Who collected it? A lad from the village post office. But here's the odd part. When the housekeeper asked whom it was addressed to, Sir Reginald only laughed and said, "An old ghost, Mrs. Finch. An old ghost come back to haunt me." Poirot twirled his moustache with satisfaction. "Ah, now we begin to see the shape of things. Come, Hastings, we have a post office to visit, and a boy who may remember the face of a ghost." They were crossing the entrance hall, when a shrill voice halted them. "Monsieur Poirot, a moment, I beg you." Professor Carmichael hurried towards them, beard bristling with agitation. In his hand he clutched a small leather notebook. "I have been examining the photographs I took of the cane last night," he panted. "Purely for scholarly purposes, you understand. And I have made a most disturbing discovery." He opened the notebook and thrust it under Poirot's nose. There, in grainy black and white, was the onyx cane resting on its crimson cushion. The tiger's head snarled as fiercely as ever, but the left emerald eye, the one with the famous flaw, was clearly visible. Only now the flaw was not a flaw at all. It was a perfect tiny keyhole. "Mon Dieu," Poirot breathed. "So the legend was true. There is a compartment?" "And whatever it contained," the professor said grimly, "someone was desperate, enough to kill Sir Reginald to obtain it." From the driveway came the sound of the Hawthorne motor car starting up. Victor's pale face appeared at the window as the rolls swept past, gravel spurting beneath its wheels. Poirot watched it disappear between the gates. "Desperate enough," he echoed softly, "or clever enough to make it appear so. Come, Hastings, the game, as our English friends say, is most definitely afoot." And somewhere in the house a clock struck 10 with the slow, deliberate strokes of a judge passing sentence. Chapter 4. Whispers from the Past. The train back to London rattled through bare November fields, but Hercule Poirot saw none of the landscape. He sat very upright, gloved hands folded on the head of his cane, an elegant malacca, nothing so vulgar as Onyx, and allowed the little grey cells to perform their silent gymnastics. Opposite him, Hastings tried 3 times to open a conversation, and was each time defeated by a raised eyebrow. At last he subsided into sulky admiration of the passing scenery. Only when the outskirts of London began to smear the windows with soot did Poirot speak. "Tell me, Hastings, what is the most dangerous thing in the world?" Hastings blinked. A loaded revolver." "No, a secret that has waited 50 years to be told. That is the most dangerous thing of all." He said no more until they stood beneath the great glass dome of the British Museum's reading room. Professor Carmichael had telephoned ahead. A nervous young curator named Mr. Featherstone awaited them beside a trolley laden with yellowed files. "Everything we have on Colonel Sebastian Mortimer and the Onyx cane," Featherstone whispered, as though the very documents might explode. "Most of it came from the Colonel's own trunks after he disappeared in 79. The family wanted it kept quiet." Poirot's eyes gleamed, and yet families, mon ami, are rarely successful at keeping things quiet forever. They worked for 3 hours. Hastings, assigned to newspaper cuttings, grew pink with excitement. "I say, Poirot, listen to this, from the Simla Gazette, 1878. Colonel Mortimer is believed to have obtained, by means yet unexplained, a black onyx staff of singular workmanship from the forbidden monastery of Takladong. Lamas declare the object cursed and demand its immediate return." Poirot merely nodded and continued reading a sealed India Office dossier marked Most Secret. When he closed it at last, his face wore an expression Hastings had learned to dread, complete and terrifying satisfaction. "Come," Poirot said, rising. "We have an appointment with a lady who was once, I believe, the most celebrated dancer in Cairo." Madame Estelle de Breton received them in a flat overlooking Regent's Park that smelled faintly of Russian cigarettes and dying roses. She must have been 70, but the bones of the face were still exquisite, the eyes still the colour of Nile water at dusk. "So," she said in French, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling, "Reginald Hawthorne is dead. I am not surprised. He always believed he could outrun the past. The past, monsieur, is an excellent sprinter." "You knew Sir Reginald in Egypt?" Poirot asked. "Knew him?" She laughed softly. "I was his mistress for 2 seasons. It was 1898. He was young, ruthless, and already collecting things he had no right to collect. One night he showed me the cane. He had just bought it from a Greek dealer in Alexandria. He was drunk with triumph. 'Estelle,' he said, 'this little stick will make me richer than Croesus.' Then he twisted the tiger's head, just so, and a narrow drawer slid out of the shaft. She demonstrated with her cigarette holder. Inside lay a roll of rice paper, covered with strange writing and a diagram. Reginald said it was the true map to the lost treasury of the Amir of Afghanistan. Emeralds, rubies, gold coins hidden when the British retreated from Kabul in 42. But there was more. On the reverse, in Mortimer's own hand, a list of names, English names, officers who had sold rifles and information to the enemy during that same retreat. Treason, monsieur, High treason." Poirot leaned forward. "And Sir Reginald, he was one of those names?" Madame de Breton's smile was wintry. "No, but his older brother was. Reginald intended to use the list the way a clever man uses dynamite, quietly, profitably, and from a safe distance. He spent years tracking down the descendants of those officers and persuading them to part with certain heirlooms at advantageous prices." "Blackmail," Hastings said indignantly. "Business," the old woman corrected. "Reginald never saw the difference." She stubbed out her cigarette. "The last time I saw the cane was in 1904. Reginald discovered I had made a tracing of the map. He was furious. He took the cane, locked it in a safe, and told me that if I ever spoke of it, he would ruin me. I believed him. I still do." Poirot rose and bowed over her hand. "You have been most courageous, madame. One last thing. Did Sir Reginald ever mention reopening the cane in recent months?" "Only last week," she said, surprised. "A mutual acquaintance brought me greetings from him. Reginald never forgot an enemy. He said the time had come to settle old scores once and for all. Those were his exact words." In the taxi returning to the manor, Poirot was silent so long that Hastings grew nervous. "Poirot, old chap, you look positively grim. What is it?" "It is very simple, mon ami, and therefore very terrible. The onyx cane does not contain treasure. It contains proof of treason that could still destroy reputations, families, fortunes. Sir Reginald was about to use that proof. Someone decided he must be stopped. And the murder was made to look like heart failure, yes. But consider the scratch on the cane, the cufflink planted beneath the hand, the muddy footprint that came from inside the house, not outside. Someone wished us to believe Victor Hawthorne guilty. Someone who knows the house, the habits of its master, and the value of a perfect scapegoat." The taxi turned between the gates of Blackthorn Manor. As they swept up the drive, a maid ran out, waving frantically. "Monsieur Poirot! Thank heaven you're back! It's Lady Hawthorne. She's locked herself in the library and won't come out. And there's been the most dreadful row with Mr. Victor, and the cane has gone." "Gone?" Poirot's voice cut like a whip. "The police moved it to the safe in Sir Reginald's study for safekeeping. But when Inspector Japp arrived an hour ago and opened the safe, it was empty, monsieur. The onyx cane has vanished." Poirot closed his eyes for a single heartbeat. When he opened them again, they glittered like green ice. "Then the game changes, my friend. From murder, we move to theft, and from theft, inevitably, to a second murder. For whoever possesses the cane now possesses a bomb with a very short fuse." He stepped from the car and stood a moment, gazing at the great grey house. Somewhere inside, a woman wept behind a locked door, a young man faced ruin, and a priceless relic had slipped through locked steel as easily as smoke. Poirot drew a deep breath of the cold afternoon air. "Come, Hastings," he said softly. "It is time to listen to the whispers of the past, before they become the screams of the present." Chapter 5. The Midnight Theft. The house slept uneasily, as though it knew that death had already walked its corridors once, and might return for an encore. Hercule Poirot did not sleep at all. At 20 minutes past 1, he stood motionless in the darkened long gallery, a small, compact shadow among taller shadows. Only the faint glow from the dying fire touched the edges of his patent leather shoes and the perfect creases of his trousers. He had dismissed Hastings an hour earlier with strict instructions to lock his bedroom door and open it for no one until morning. Hastings had protested, of course, but Poirot had been immovable. Now he waited, patient as a cat at a mouse hole, ears tuned to every creak of the old house settling into frost. At 1:33 the silence broke. A floorboard sighed, not the casual complaint of temperature, but the deliberate pressure of a human foot. Then another. Soft, careful, yet unmistakable to ears as sensitive as Poirot's. The sounds came from the west corridor, the direction of Sir Reginald's study. Poirot slipped off his shoes, placed them neatly side by side beneath a suit of armour, and glided forward in stockinged feet. The study door stood ajar exactly as the police had left it, sealed with a simple wax stamp across the lock. The seal was unbroken, yet the door itself had been opened a finger's breadth. Someone, then, had entered from inside the room. Poirot eased the door wider and stepped into the gloom. Moonlight, thin and silver, fell through the tall windows and laid cold bars across the carpet. The desk lamp had been extinguished, but the green-shaded bulb still glowed faintly, enough to show the safe door standing open like a mocking mouth. The combination dial spun loosely. Someone had known the numbers. The onyx cane was gone. Poirot's gaze swept the room with mechanical precision. Nothing else appeared disturbed. The muddy footprint he had noted earlier had been carefully brushed away. Even the faint scent of river silt had vanished beneath the sharper odour of candle smoke. He knelt beside the safe. On the carpet, almost invisible against the dark crimson, lay a single strand of pale gold hair. Long, silky, unmistakably a woman's. Poirot lifted it delicately between thumb and forefinger, then slipped it into a small envelope from his waistcoat pocket. From the terrace came the tiniest scrape of gravel under a cautious heel. He moved to the French windows. They were closed, but unlatched. When he pushed, one pane swung silently outward on well-oiled hinges. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of frost and, beneath it, something else. The ghost of a perfume he had noticed earlier that evening. Jasmine and sandalwood, expensive, unmistakable. Diana Vale. Poirot stepped onto the terrace. The gravel bore a confusion of prints, but two sets stood out. A man's large evening shoe, and beside it the narrower, elegant mark of a high-heeled slipper. Both led away from the house toward the yew walk that bordered the rose garden. He followed. The moonlight was bright enough to read by. The tracks moved quickly, then slowed. At the entrance to the old ice house, a domed brick structure half swallowed by ivy, the prince stopped. The iron-bound door stood open 6 inches. Poirot paused, listening. From within came the soft scrape of metal on stone, and a muffled oath in a voice he recognized instantly. He pushed the door wide and stepped inside. The ice house was a cavern of darkness and echoing cold. A single candle guttered on an upturned crate, throwing wild shadows across the frost-rimed walls. Diana Vale stood beside a stone bench, the onyx cane clutched in both hands like a weapon. At her feet lay Felix Reinhardt, the Viennese collector, unconscious, a livid bruise rising on his temple. The actress whirled as Poirot entered, eyes huge in the candlelight. "Stay back!" she hissed. "I'll scream the house down!" "Calme-toi, mademoiselle," Poirot said softly, raising both hands. "I have no wish to alarm the household. Merely to understand why the most celebrated leading lady in London finds herself in an ice house at 2 a.m, armed with a walking stick and a conscience that appears troubled." Diana's laugh was brittle. "Conscience, don't be ridiculous. I came to retrieve what is rightfully mine. The cane belonged to Sir Reginald. It belonged to my father first." The words burst from her like a sob. "Sebastian Mortimer was my father. He never married my mother, but the cane was promised to me, the only thing he left. Reginald stole it from her after father disappeared. I've waited 20 years to take it back." Poirot's eyebrows rose a fraction. And the unconscious Herr Reinhardt? He followed me, said he knew the combination to the safe. Reginald bragged about it once, drunk in Vienna. He wanted the cane for himself. We argued. He tried to take it by force. She touched the bruise on Reinhardt's temple with the ferrule of the cane. Onyx is harder than skull, it seems. Reinhardt groaned and stirred. Poirot took one swift step forward and neatly possessed himself of the cane. Diana was too shocked to resist. "Enough, mademoiselle. You will return to the house at once, by the servant's stair. You will speak of this to no one. Tomorrow we will discuss restitution and reparations. For tonight, the cane returns to my custody." Diana stared at him, candlelight flickering across tears she refused to shed. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If the list inside that cane is made public, half the old families in England will be ruined. My father's name among them. I came for the map, yes, but also to destroy the list." Poirot regarded her for a long moment. "Destroying evidence is a serious matter, mademoiselle. So is striking a man senseless, but murder is another thing entirely. Tell me, were you in the study earlier this evening, before Sir Reginald died?" "No." The denial came too quickly. "I was with Victor until 11. Ask anyone." "I intend to," Poirot said grimly. He escorted her to the side door, watched her slip inside, then returned to the ice house. Reinhardt was sitting up, holding his head and cursing fluently in 3 languages. Poirot offered a silk handkerchief. "Compose yourself, monsieur. You have sustained a contusion, nothing more. In a moment you will return to your room and say nothing of this night's adventure. Tomorrow, perhaps, we will all behave with more civilization." Reinhardt glared, but the fight had gone out of him. He stumbled away toward the house. Poirot stood alone in the frost-cold darkness, the onyx cane once more in his possession. He turned it slowly, feeling for the hidden catch Madame de Breton had described. The tiger's head resisted, then gave with a soft click. A narrow drawer slid out. Inside lay a roll of brittle rice paper and a smaller, modern sheet folded very small. Poirot did not unroll them, not yet. Instead he looked up at the star-drenched sky and spoke aloud to the night. "2 attempts in one night," he murmured. "First murder disguised as heart failure, now theft disguised as family restitution. Someone is very busy, n'est-ce pas? And someone, I think, has made a serious miscalculation." He closed the drawer, snapped the tiger's head back into place, and started toward the house. Behind him, the candle in the ice house guttered and went out, leaving only the faint lingering scent of jasmine on the winter air. Chapter 6. Allies and Adversaries. Inspector Japp arrived at Blackthorn Manor at 9:30, looking as though he had been dragged through a hedge by an irritable bulldog. "Morning, Mr. Poirot," he growled, stamping frost from his boots in the entrance hall. "I hear you've been playing night watchman while I was trying to get a decent night's sleep. The cane's been stolen, the safe opened like a tin of sardines, and 2 guests have headaches that weren't caused by Sir Reginald's claret. Care to tell me what the devil is going on?" Poirot greeted him with a beaming smile and a cup of excellent coffee. "All in good time, mon cher Japp. First, permit me to present the recovered article." From beneath his travelling cloak, he produced the onyx cane, wrapped in a silk scarf. Japp's eyebrows shot up. "You had it all along?" "Let us say I intercepted it before it could vanish into the wrong hands. It is now safe, and it will remain in my possession until the rightful moment." Japp opened his mouth, closed it again, and finally gave the resigned sigh of a man who had fought this particular battle before. "Right. I'll have a man posted outside your door tonight." And now I want statements from every soul in this house. Starting with that Viennese fellow and the actress. Alas, Poirot said smoothly, Herr Reinhardt has already departed for London, summoned by an urgent cable. And Miss Vale is indisposed, migraine. But I can assure you their stories will add little to what we already know. Japp fixed him with a fishy stare. Meaning you've already questioned them, and don't want me mucking up your theories. Précisément. The inspector snorted, but there was a reluctant twinkle in his eye. One day, Poirot, you'll go too far. That day, Poirot replied cheerfully, is not this day. While Japp organized his men, Poirot and Hastings retired to the library. A coal fire crackled in the grate. The morning papers lay folded, still screaming headlines about the sudden death of Sir Reginald Hawthorne. Poirot laid the cane on the table and regarded it thoughtfully. Now we have allies, Hastings, and adversaries. The question is, which is which? He rang the bell. When Grimshaw appeared, Poirot asked for Lady Hawthorne. The butler hesitated. Her ladyship is with the solicitor, sir, and Mr. Victor has not come down. Excellent, then we shall go up. They found Victor in his dressing room, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. A half-empty whiskey decanter stood on the bureau. I'm finished, he said dully when he saw Poirot. The will was read this morning. Uncle left everything, house, collections, the entire estate, to a trust for the establishment of a museum. I get a miserable annuity of 2,000 a year. Enough to keep me from the workhouse, but not enough to pay my debts. My creditors will have me in the Marshalsea by Christmas. Poirot's gaze was compassionate, but unrelenting. And the cane? Bequeathed to the same trust. I'll never even touch it again. Victor laughed bitterly. All that planning, all those nights wondering how to open the blasted thing, for nothing. You still believe there is treasure? Hastings asked. Victor shrugged. Doesn't matter now. The joke's on me. Poirot studied him for a long moment. Perhaps not entirely, monsieur. Tell me, who benefits if you are convicted of your uncle's murder? Victor blinked. No one. The trust is unbreakable. Unless, Poirot said softly, the police discover that the heir murdered to gain control of the Kane's secret, disinheritance for crime. The estate would then revert to the next in line. Lady Hawthorne, I believe. Victor went very still. Clarissa. She hated Uncle Reginald, but murder. People have killed for less than a fortune, Poirot said. Come. We have an appointment in the drawing-room. Lady Hawthorne was already there, rigid in black bombazine, a sealed envelope in her lap. Monsieur Poirot, she began, the solicitor has just delivered this. It was lodged with the will, to be opened only in the event of Sir Reginald's unnatural death. She handed it over with fingers that trembled slightly. Poirot slit the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream paper. If you are reading this, then someone has succeeded where so many have failed. The onyx cane contains proof that certain distinguished English families owe their wealth to treason in 1842. I have decided to expose them. The names are in the cane's secret drawer. Destroy this letter. The choice is now yours. R.H. Poirot read it aloud. Lady Hawthorne's face drained of colour. Reginald was mad, she whispered. He would have ruined us all. Including you, madame. She met his gaze steadily. My grandfather's name is on that list. If it had been published, I would have lost everything, position, friends, even this house. But I did not kill him. Yet someone did, Poirot said. And someone tried very hard to make Victor appear guilty. He placed the cane on the table between them. Madame, the drawer opens thus. He twisted the tiger's head. The narrow compartment slid out. Carefully, he removed the roll of rice paper and the smaller modern sheet. The rice paper was the map, delicate, faded, but still legible. The modern sheet contained 12 names, written in Sir Reginald's impatient scrawl. Among them, Carmichael, Trent, Reinhardt, and, as expected, Lady Hawthorne's maiden name. Victor stared at the list as though it were a death warrant. Poirot folded both documents and returned them to the drawer. "These papers," he said quietly, "will remain sealed until I decide otherwise. There has been enough ruin." Lady Hawthorne's eyes filled with sudden tears. "You would protect us." "I protect the innocent," Poirot corrected. "The guilty, that is another matter." At that moment, the door burst open and Jasper Trent strode in, hat in hand. "Forgive the intrusion," he said brusquely, "but I've just had a telephone call from London. My gallery was broken into last night. Nothing taken, except a rather fine copy of the Onyx cane I commissioned years ago as a joke. Someone swapped the fake for the real thing, then discovered the mistake, and came here to rectify it." He looked pointedly at the cane on the table. "Too late, Mr. Trent," Poirot said with a small smile. "The real cane never left the house, but your information is most valuable. It tells us our thief is both bold and knowledgeable, and now, I suspect, extremely frustrated." Trent's sun-tanned face darkened. "Then the game continues." "Precisely," Poirot agreed. "And the next move, I think, will be decisive." He turned to Lady Hawthorne. "Madame, tonight every guest who remains will gather in the long gallery at 10 o'clock. The cane will be displayed once more. And this time, mon ami, we shall set a trap that not even the cleverest rat can escape." Outside the window, the November sky pressed low and sullen, promising snow before nightfall. Inside, the fire crackled, and the onyx cane lay on the table like a sleeping serpent waiting to strike. Poirot allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "Patience, Hastings," he murmured. "The little grey cells are about to have their finest hour." Chapter 7. The False Trail. Snow began to fall at 4 o'clock. Thick, deliberate flakes that turned the world outside Blackthorn Manor into a shaking kaleidoscope of white. By 6 the drive was obliterated. The telephone wires sang in the wind, and every servant in the house was pressed into service keeping fires alight and passages clear of drifting cold. Hercule Poirot stood at the library window and watched the storm with satisfaction. "Perfect," he murmured. "The stage is set, the audience assembled, and nature herself has drawn the curtain. Tonight, mon ami, we shall see who cannot resist temptation." Hastings, who had spent the afternoon helping the local constable dig his car out of a drift, looked damp and martyred. "I still don't see why we had to send Jap back to London," he grumbled, rubbing circulation into his fingers. "One extra revolver might have come in handy." "Jap is an excellent officer," Poirot replied, "but he has the subtlety of a steamroller. Tonight we require finesse, not force." The bait had already been laid. At 5:30, Poirot had gathered the remaining household in the long gallery. Lady Hawthorne, Victor, Professor Carmichael, Jasper Trent, and the handful of servants who had not yet fled to warmer employment. In full view of everyone, he had placed the onyx cane on its crimson cushion, beneath a glass dome, borrowed from a display case. Then, with theatrical solemnity, he had locked the dome, pocketed the key, and announced that the cane would remain there until morning, guarded in shifts by himself and Hastings. What no one except Poirot knew was that the cane beneath the glass was Trent's fake, the one stolen from his gallery and returned to the house by the thief who discovered the error. The real cane lay snug in Poirot's locked dispatch case upstairs, its deadly secret still intact. The false trail had begun. At 8 o'clock supper was served in the dining room. A tense, silent meal. Victor drank steadily. Lady Hawthorne barely touched her soup. Professor Carmichael kept darting longing glances toward the gallery, as though the cane might sprout legs and walk away. Jasper Trent alone seemed amused, lighting one cigarette from the butt of another and watching the company with lazy, predatory eyes. At 9:30, Poirot rose. "Mesdames et messieurs, I propose we retire early. The storm grows worse, and tomorrow the police will return in force. Captain Hastings and I will take the first watch in the gallery. At midnight, Mr. Trent has kindly agreed to relieve us." Trent inclined his head mockingly here. The house settled into watchful darkness. Lamps were turned low, fires banked, footsteps echoed and died away. At 11, Poirot and Hastings sat in two high-backed chairs facing the glass dome. A single lamp cast a pool of gold across the crimson cushion. The fake cane gleamed with wicked authenticity. Hastings yawned enormously. "I say, Poirot, do you really think our man will try tonight? In this weather, depend upon it," Poirot whispered. "The storm is the perfect cloak, and greed, mon ami, is a most powerful stimulant. It keeps one warm when the thermometer falls." 11:45. The house creaked like an old ship. Snow hissed against the windows. 11:52. A faint sound, the softest click of a latch, came from the service corridor behind the panelling. Poirot's hand closed over Hastings' wrist in silent warning. A section of the wooden wainscot swung inward. A figure slipped through, muffled in a dark overcoat, face concealed by a silk scarf. Gloved hands carried a small leather case. The intruder moved with confident economy. 3 silent steps to the display, a tiny glass cutter produced, a perfect circle scored around the lock of the dome. 30 seconds later, the glass lid lifted on its hinge. The gloved hand reached for the cane. Poirot rose like a jack-in-the-box. "Bonsoir, monsieur, or should I say, Professor Carmichael." The scarf muffled a startled oath. The figure spun, but Hastings was already blocking the panel door. Carmichael, for it was indeed the professor, ripped the scarf from his face, beard bristling with fury and fear. "You meddlesome little peacock," he spat. "This is scholarly research." "With a glass cutter and a jemmy?" Poirot inquired politely. Come, Professor. You tried to open the real cane the night Sir Reginald died. When you failed, you planted Victor's cufflink and attempted to make murder look like heart failure. Then, discovering you had stolen a forgery, you returned tonight for the genuine article. A busy schedule for an academic. Carmichael's eyes darted like a cornered animal's. You cannot prove any of this. On the contrary, Poirot produced the envelope containing the pale gold hair. This was found beside the safe last night. Rather distinctive, n'est-ce pas? Not many gentlemen sport a mane quite so leonine. The professor's hand went instinctively to his beard. Poirot continued remorselessly. And the mud on your shoes after the murder, Thames mud, from the embankment near the museum where you examined the Mortimer papers. Most incriminating. You wished to destroy the list of names before Sir Reginald could publish it. Your own grandfather's disgrace would have ended your career. Carmichael sagged. He was framed, he whispered, a scapegoat for richer men. I only wanted justice. By committing murder? Hastings demanded. The professor said nothing. Poirot sighed. You will return to your room, monsieur. Tomorrow you will give Inspector Japp a full confession. Attempted theft tonight, yes. But the greater crime was the poison administered to Sir Reginald, a rare South American alkaloid, I fancy, introduced through a hollow needle concealed in the tiger's head handle. The scratch we noticed was made when you tried to extract the needle afterwards and failed. Carmichael stared at the fake cane as though seeing it for the first time. "You knew it was a copy," he said slowly, "from the moment Mr. Trent described the theft of his forgery. Only the murderer would have returned it here, hoping to exchange it again for the original." Snow lightened the windows as the storm began to ease. Carmichael allowed Hastings to lead him away without resistance. When they had gone, Poirot lifted the glass dome and removed the fake cane. "A good performance, Hastings, though I regret the necessity of sacrificing Professor Carmichael's reputation." "But he did it, Poirot. He murdered Sir Reginald." Poirot shook his head gently. "No, mon ami. He murdered no one. He's a thief, yes, and a desperate man, but not our killer. Observe." He turned the false cane in the lamplight. The tiger's left eye, the one that should contain the keyhole, was merely painted glass. Professor Carmichael believed this was the original. Yet the real cane has already been opened by someone who knew exactly where the mechanism was hidden. Our murderer is still among us, laughing at how easily we swallowed the false trail. Hastings gaped. Then tonight was all a charade? A necessary one? It has eliminated one suspect and confirmed that the true killer is supremely confident. Tomorrow, Hastings, we tighten the net. He replaced the fake cane, locked the dome, and pocketed the key once more. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and treacherous, covering every footprint, every trace of guilt. Inside the long gallery, the lamp burned lower, and the tiger on the false cane grinned its painted grin at secrets still safely hidden. Chapter 8. Revelations in the Rain. The storm broke at dawn, not with thunder, but with a long, weary sigh, as though the sky itself had grown tired of holding its breath. By 9 o'clock the snow had turned to a cold, driving rain that lashed the windows of Blackthorn Manor and turned every path into a quagmire. Hercule Poirot stood before the fireplace in the long gallery, hands clasped behind his back, the onyx cane, the real one, resting against a chair like an obedient but dangerous dog. Around him, the remaining suspects had been gathered by the simple expedient of locking every outer door and posting 2 stolid constables in the hall. They made a sorry picture. Lady Hawthorne sat very straight in a high-backed chair, black veil thrown back, face the colour of old parchment. Victor Hawthorne stood behind her, one hand on the chair, as though steadying himself against a high wind. Jasper Trent lounged against a suit of armour, cigarette unlit between his fingers, eyes never leaving the cane. Professor Carmichael, beard drooping like a wilted plant, had been allowed to attend under police guard. His attempted theft the previous night had stripped him of dignity, but not, apparently, of curiosity. Diana Vale had not yet appeared. Inspector Japp, recalled from London by urgent telegram, stood beside Poirot with the resigned air of a man who has learned to expect miracles on a Tuesday. Poirot cleared his throat. The sound was small, yet every head turned. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice soft but carrying to the furthest corner, "we have reached the moment of truth. Last night Professor Carmichael tried to steal what he believed was the onyx cane. He failed because the cane he coveted was a forgery. Yet the real cane has never left this house. It has been in my possession since Mademoiselle Diana Vale attempted to remove it 2 nights ago. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Poirot raised a hand. Patience. All will be explained. First, let us be clear what this cane contains. He twisted the tiger's head. The secret drawer slid out with a faint click. From it, he drew the roll of rice paper and the folded modern sheet. The map is genuine, a curiosity no more. The list of names, however, is dynamite. 12 English families whose fortunes began with treason in 1842. Sir Reginald intended to expose them. Someone in this room decided he must die before he could. Lady Hawthorne's voice cut like broken glass. You said last night the Professor Carmichael wished to suppress the list, yes. He administered a harmless sedative to Sir Reginald, enough to make death appear natural, and attempted to open the cane. He failed. The true murderer succeeded where the Professor did not. Poirot's gaze swept the room and settled on Jasper Trent. Monsieur Trent, you have been very clever. You arranged for your own forgery to be stolen from your gallery, then discovered the theft, thereby providing yourself an alibi while the fake was planted here. You knew the combination to the safe. Sir Reginald boasted of it in Vienna, you said. You knew the mechanism of the cane. You had handled the forgery often enough to study photographs of the original. And you knew exactly how to turn suspicion toward young Victor Hawthorne. Trent's smile was lazy. Pretty story, Poirot. Got any proof? Abundantly. Poirot produced a small glass vial from his pocket. This was found this morning in the lining of your travelling bag, hidden inside a tin of Turkish cigarettes. Curare, refined South American. A scratch from a poisoned needle concealed in the tiger's handle would kill within minutes, yet leave scarcely a mark. The scratch we noticed the first night was not from a failed attempt to open the cane, but from the murderer's hurried effort to remove the needle afterwards. The needle itself, hollow gold, exquisitely made, was discovered an hour ago in the rainwater pipe outside the study window, where you dropped it. Trent's sun-tanned face had gone the colour of tallow. You can't tie that poison to me. On the contrary, the vial bears the mark of a certain pharmacist in Lima, a gentleman who keeps excellent records. You purchased it last year, ostensibly for anthropological research. And there is more. Poirot turned to Lady Hawthorne. Madam, you told me you discovered your husband already dead. That was not the truth. You entered the study while he was dying. You saw the murderer leave by the terrace door. You said nothing because you believed Victor guilty, and you were prepared to let him hang to protect the family name. Lady Hawthorne's lips trembled. You thought wrong. Poirot's voice softened. But you are not the only one who has protected a murderer. He looked toward the door. Diana! The actress appeared as though conjured, pale, beautiful, and quite unafraid. She wore a simple dark dress and no jewellery save a single emerald on a chain, the exact shade of the tiger's eyes. You knew, Poirot said gently. From the beginning, you knew who killed Sir Reginald. Because you were in the study with him when Trent entered. You hid behind the screen when the murder was done. You watched Trent plant Victor's cufflink. And you said nothing because Trent had promised to destroy the list that would have ruined your father's memory forever. Diana's chin lifted. Yes, I watched him do it. And I would have let Victor take the blame if it meant the list burned. Trent lunged suddenly, cigarette case, flashing as he flicked it open, revealing not cigarettes but a tiny derringer. Jap moved like lightning, but Diana was faster. She snatched the onyx cane from the chair and brought it down across Trent's wrist with a crack that sounded like a breaking bone. The derringer spun across the carpet. Trent cradled his arm, cursing. Diana faced Poirot, eyes blazing. He lied to me. After he killed Reginald, he told me the list was already destroyed. Then last night, I found this in his room. She drew from her pocket a charred fragment of rice paper, part of the map, half burned. He kept it, for future blackmail, just like Reginald. Silence fell, broken only by the rain against the windows. Poirot took the fragment, turned it over thoughtfully. "Then justice is simple," he said at last. "Monsieur Tron will face trial for murder. The list, the complete list, will be placed in the hands of the proper authorities. Reputations may suffer, but truth, enfin, will triumph." He looked at each face in turn. Victor shaken but alive with hope. Lady Hawthorne weeping silently. Professor Carmichael staring at the floor. Diana Vale standing very straight, as though on a stage delivering her final line. "And the onyx cane?" Japp asked gruffly. Poirot smiled, a small, sad smile. "The cane returns to its rightful owner, Colonel Mortimer's daughter." He bowed to Diana. She took the cane with steady hands, then laid it gently on the table. "No," she said quietly, "let it go to the museum Sir Reginald planned. Let people see it for what it is, beautiful, dangerous, and finally powerless." Outside, the rain began to ease. A watery sun broke through the clouds, striking the tiger's emerald eyes so that for one instant they seemed alive again. Poirot twirled his moustache and permitted himself a sigh of profound satisfaction. "The case is concluded," he announced, "and the little grey cells, they are content." Chapter 9. The Cane's Curse Unveiled. The long gallery had never felt so cold. Though fires roared in every grate and the chandeliers blazed, the air itself seemed to carry the chill of an opened grave. The suspects, if that word still applied, stood in a loose half-circle, watching Poirot with the wary stillness of people who have just seen one truth torn away and are terrified of what might replace it. Jasper Trent sat apart, left wrist-bound and guarded by a silent constable, his sun-tanned face now the colour of wet ash. Diana Vale stood beside the display table, one hand resting lightly on the onyx cane, as though it were a living thing that might yet bite. Lady Hawthorne had sunk into a chair, hands clenched so tightly that the knuckles showed white. Victor hovered behind her, eyes darting from face to face like a man expecting the floor to open. Inspector Japp cleared his throat. "Well, Mr. Poirot, you've given us the performance of a lifetime. Trent poisoned Sir Reginald, planted the cufflink, tried to frame the nephew. Case closed, eh?" Poirot did not answer at once. He walked slowly to the windows, where rain still streaked the glass in silver threads, and for a long moment simply stared out at the sodden gardens. "No, mon ami," he said at last, turning back to the room. "Not closed, merely interrupted." A ripple of unease passed through the company. Poirot's voice, when he continued, was quieter than anyone had ever heard it, yet every word carried like a bell. "Consider the facts we have accepted too easily. Fact: Sir Reginald was killed by curare, delivered through a hollow needle hidden in the tiger's head. Fact: the needle was removed after death, leaving only a scratch. Fact: Jasper Trent possessed curare and had motive, opportunity, and cunning." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "And yet," he went on softly, "there are inconsistencies that scream louder than any confession. The curare vial found in Monsieur Tront's bag was full, its seal unbroken. The hollow needle recovered from the drainpipe had been wiped clean of poison residue, as though the murderer wished us to find the method but not the man. Most telling of all. When I examined the cane this morning, The secret drawer contained the map and the list of names, but the list was missing one crucial sheet. He held up a single torn fragment, the corner of a page bearing the initials CH. "Lady Hawthorne," Poirot said gently, "your maiden name was Clarissa Haverford, n'est-ce pas?" Lady Hawthorne rose slowly, as though lifted by invisible strings. "You cannot seriously suggest—" "I suggest nothing, madame. I state. The final page of Sir Reginald's list named not 12 families, but 13. The 13th was Haverford. Your father, who did not merely sell information to the enemy in 1842, but personally led the ambush that slaughtered 2 companies of British troops. Sir Reginald discovered proof only last month. Letters hidden in the lining of Colonel Mortimer's campaign trunk. He wrote to you demanding a private settlement, £1 million or exposure. You paid a first instalment, then decided there would be no second." Victor made a strangled sound. "Aunt Clarissa, silence, Victor." Her voice cracked like a whip. Then, to Poirot, "Prove it, with pleasure." Poirot crossed to the cane, and, with deliberate care, twisted the tiger's head a second time. Not the drawer everyone had seen, but a smaller, concealed mechanism beneath the left emerald eye. A hair-thin panel slid aside, revealing a cavity no longer than a little finger. From it Poirot drew a tiny glass ampule, empty, and a gold needle no thicker than a darning pin. "The true murder weapon," he said. "The drawer we all watched held the decoy list, the one you allowed Trent to steal and partially burn, knowing it would incriminate him. The real evidence and the real poison were hidden here, where only the person who had studied the cane for 20 years would know to look." Lady Hawthorne's composure shattered. She laughed, a high, terrible sound. 20 years, she repeated. 20 years of smiling at that monster, while he held my father's honour over my head like a sword. When he showed me the final letter, when he laughed and said the price had just doubled, something in me snapped. I had the needle made in Geneva. They will confirm it. I had the curare sent from Brazil under a false name. On the night of the dinner, I waited until he was alone with the cane, admiring his triumph. One scratch. He thought I was merely caressing the tiger's head. He died in minutes. Then I planted Victor's cufflink, opened the terrace door to suggest an intruder, and waited for the perfect scapegoat to be blamed. She turned to Victor with sudden savagery. "You were supposed to hang. You with your gambling and your whoring. You would have squandered everything anyway. Better a quick death than the slow ruin you deserved." Victor recoiled as though struck. Diana Vale moved first. She seized the cane and held it out toward Lady Hawthorne like a spear. "You used me," she said, voice shaking with fury. "You knew I believed Trent guilty. You let me protect him. You let me believe the list was safe." Lady Hawthorne's smile was almost tender. "My dear, you were always such a convincing actress." Japp stepped forward, handcuffs ready, but Poirot lifted a hand. "One moment, Inspector. Madame has one last performance to give." He faced Lady Hawthorne directly. "You arranged everything with exquisite care. You even persuaded Trent to steal the forgery, knowing his greed would make him the perfect false murderer. But you made one mistake. The mistake of all murderers who believe themselves more clever than Hercule Poirot. You underestimated the power of vanity." He held up the empty ampule. "This glass bears your fingerprint, madame, the one you left when you loaded the needle. And the letter you burned in the library grate, the one Sir Reginald wrote demanding payment, did not burn completely. The corner with your initials survived. Scotland Yard recovered it this morning." Lady Hawthorne looked suddenly very old. "So, she said quietly. The cane's curse claims another victim after all. She reached into her sleeve and drew out a small pearl-handled revolver. Victor cried out. Jap lunged, but Diana Vale was faster. With all the strength of betrayed fury, she swung the onyx cane in a glittering arc. The heavy onyx shaft caught Lady Hawthorne just above the temple. The revolver spun from her fingers and clattered across the parquet. She crumpled without a sound. For a moment, no one moved. Then Poirot knelt beside her, 2 fingers at her throat. "She lives," he said, "though perhaps she will wish otherwise when she wakes." He rose and looked at the cane lying on the floor, its tiger's head staring blindly at the ceiling. "The curse," he murmured, "was never in the cane. It was in the secrets men and women buried inside it, and in the lengths they would go to keep those secrets buried." Outside, the rain had stopped. A weak sun broke through the clouds and struck the scattered emeralds of the tiger's eyes, scattering green fire across the room like a final, mocking salute. Chapter 10. The Little Grey Cells. Triumph. The long gallery was so still that the rain on the windows sounded like the ticking of an immense clock counting down the final seconds. Poirot let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. Then he spoke, softly, precisely, and without mercy. "The poison was never curare. Curare requires a wound, a scratch, a puncture. The police surgeon found no such mark on Sir Reginald, not even the faintest abrasion. Yet death was almost instantaneous. The heart stopped as though a switch had been thrown. That is not the work of curare. That is the work of something far rarer, far more elegant." He turned the onyx cane slowly in the lamplight, so that every carved symbol caught the glow. "This cane is not merely a container for secrets. It is a weapon. The tiger's head conceals a spring-loaded mechanism. When the left emerald eye is pressed thus, a microscopic glass dart, no longer than a sewing needle and coated with tetrodotoxin from the Japanese fugu fish, is fired with a pressure of air. The dart dissolves instantly in the bloodstream. No mark, no trace, only death." He demonstrated. There was a faint hiss, almost inaudible. A tiny crystal dart shot across the room and buried itself in the velvet cushion with a soft thud. Hastings gave a strangled yelp. Lady Hawthorne pressed a hand to her throat. "Sir Reginald himself showed the murderer how the mechanism worked," Poirot continued. "During the unveiling, he turned the cane in his hands, boasting of its secrets. All the killer had to do was stand close, wait until Sir Reginald held the cane horizontally, press the hidden stud, and the dart flew. The scratch we noticed was made later, when the murderer tried to remove the spent cartridge and failed. The dart itself dissolved in Sir Reginald's palm. He clutched the cane as he died. He laid the cane gently down. And the murderer is Lady Hawthorne." The words fell into the room like a guillotine. Clarissa Hawthorne did not faint or protest. She simply closed her eyes, as though a great weight had finally been lifted. Victor cried out, "Aunt Clarissa, no!" But Poirot was already producing the evidence, piece by damning piece. First, the telegram Sir Reginald burned. It was signed C.H., and begged him to meet in the study at 10. "You sent it from Guildford that afternoon, madame, knowing he would come alone." Second, the muddy footprint on the terrace. "It was made by your gardening shoes. Size 5, narrow, with the same worn heel. You walked through the rose bed to create the illusion of an intruder." Third, the gold hair beside the safe. Not the professor's, yours. You shed it when you opened the safe that same night, to remove the list of names, your grandfather's name among them, and to plant Victor's cufflink. Fourth, the forged will. You altered it months ago, substituting the museum trust for Victor's inheritance, knowing that if Victor were hanged for murder, the estate would revert to you alone. And finally, Poirot's voice softened, almost sorrowful, the confession you made to me yesterday. You said you found your husband already dead. Yet when I asked if anything was missing from the desk, you replied, "No paper missing." I had not mentioned a paper. Only the murderer could have known the list had been taken. Lady Hawthorne opened her eyes. They were dry, ancient, terribly calm. Reginald was going to destroy everything, she said. My family's name, Victor's future, this house. Everything I had sacrificed 40 years to protect. He laughed when I begged him to burn the list. He said the past must pay its debts. I could not let him do it. She looked at Victor, and for the first time her composure cracked. I thought if you were suspected just long enough for the list to vanish, the police would have no motive to pursue. You would have been acquitted. I never meant you to hang, my dear, only to be frightened into reform. Victor turned away, shoulders shaking. Diana Vale spoke for the first time, voice raw. And Trent? Why let him take the blame? Lady Hawthorne's smile was wintry. Jasper was greedy. Greedy men make excellent scapegoats. When he began courting me after Reginald's death, whispering about marriage, I encouraged him. I even gave him the combination to the safe, knowing he would try to steal the cane and further muddy the waters. Trent swore savagely and lunged, but Japp's constables pinned him effortlessly. Poirot raised a hand. Monsieur Trent is guilty of many things, attempted theft, conspiracy, assault upon Herr Reinhardt, but not of murder. He will face charges, but not the rope. He turned back to Lady Hawthorne. The dart mechanism was meant for Colonel Mortimer's enemies in the Hindu Kush. You turned it upon your own husband. That, madame, is the true curse of the onyx cane. Lady Hawthorne rose. She was quite steady now. Will you give me a moment alone with my nephew? Japp glanced at Poirot. Poirot nodded once. The constable stepped back. Lady Hawthorne walked to Victor, laid a gloved hand against his cheek. "Forgive me," she whispered. Victor could not speak. He only shook his head, tears falling unashamed. Then Lady Hawthorne turned, walked to the French windows and opened them. Cold, wet air swept in, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Before anyone realized what she intended, she stepped out onto the terrace and closed the windows behind her. Japp shouted and ran forward, but the lock clicked shut. Through the streaming glass they saw her, walk steadily across the lawn toward the ornamental lake, black dress and veil whipping in the wind. Victor screamed her name once. By the time the constables had forced the doors, she had reached the water's edge. She did not hesitate. She walked straight in, the dark water closing over the black silk until there was nothing left but widening circles and the relentless rain. Victor fell to his knees on the terrace, sobbing like a child. Inside the long gallery, Poirot stood very still, the onyx cane heavy in his hands. Diana Vale came to him quietly. "What happens to it now?" she asked. Poirot looked at the cane for a long moment, then handed it to her. "To the British Museum," he said, "with a full account of its history and its curse. Let the truth be told at last. Some secrets are better displayed under glass than hidden in drawers." He turned to Japp. "The inquest will record suicide during temporary insanity. Lady Hawthorne's confession was not made under oath. There is no need to drag the family further through the mire." Japp nodded slowly. "You're a soft touch, Poirot." Non, mon ami. I am merely tired of curses. That evening, as the Bentley carried them back to London through clearing skies, Hastings ventured a question. Do you think the cane really was cursed, Poirot? Poirot gazed out at the passing fields, silvered now with melting snow. Cursed, perhaps? Or perhaps the curse was simply human nature. Greed, fear, pride, love twisted into something monstrous. The cane did not kill Sir Reginald, nor Lady Hawthorne. They killed themselves long before the tiger's head ever opened its emerald eye. He was silent the rest of the way. When they reached the familiar flat in Whitehall, Poirot paused on the threshold and looked back at the waiting car. "Come, Hastings," he said at last. "Tonight we drink not chocolate, but a small glass of crème de menthe. And tomorrow, the little grace cells will rest." Behind them, in the museum vaults of London, the onyx cane lay under lock and key, its tiger smiling its eternal, enigmatic smile at visitors who would never know the full measure of the secrets it had guarded and the lives it had claimed. And somewhere, in the quiet darkness, the curse slept on. But only for a time.